Overdrive this week, the Tata Harrier EV takes on a series of tough terrains, proving its off-road capabilities in style. We also get a first look at Suzuki's debut electric vehicle for the market, the all-new eAccess. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini. The Tata EV has come in hot with a big electric SUV, the Harrier EV, which not only caters to the rear-wheel drive enthusiast but also has an all-wheel drive option, or should I call it quad-wheel drive in Tata speak. Now it's time to find out whether this can live up to its bold claims.
A few weeks ago, you saw the Harrier EV make a big splash in screens. We're finally getting behind the wheel today for a very short time. But as you can see from the setting around me, it's quite different. It's an off-road course at the Budh International Circuit. We're also going to drive it on track for a little bit. So let's see what the Harrier EV can do in these kind of conditions. Just for a quick refresher, the Harrier EV makes 158 PS from its front motor and 238 from its rear one. But the maximum combined output is 313 PS, while torque is 504 Nm. There's 50-50 weight distribution and the SUV can do 0 to 100 kmph in 6.3 seconds, as you will see later in this video. It has a limited top speed of 180 kmph. So now we're just getting behind the wheel of the Harrier EV on the prepared off-road course that you just probably have seen from the outside. Now I'm being instructed to first go into a rock pit. This is a completely standard Harrier EV. We're driving it in one of the off-road modes that it has, in the rock and crawl mode. I'm sure you'll be able to see from the outside how it does. So as you can see, the off-road assist sort of managing traction between the two axles, and it's sort of like a cruise control but for off-road situations. And yeah, it's quite simple. I didn't really have to do anything, just steer the car wherever I had to go. I'm on the axle twister right now. So we just tried the negative side incline in the rock and crawl mode. Then we also tried out the sand mode, where the car sort of drivetrain, it sort of loosens it up a little bit for that extra momentum that we need on sand. Now we're going to climb up a 34-degree incline, which looks quite intimidating from the outside, but let's see how it feels from the inside. I can only see sky right now, can't see anything else. Now that dip by itself, I think even though we didn't use a hill descent control, I think the car managed pretty well with the traction that was on offer. And just on the brakes, it was quite nice. Now we're trying a more advanced version of that side incline test that we did. So again, we're in the same mud and ruts mode. So let's see how it performs. As you can see, I'm barely held on to my seat. The car is at a massive angle. Now you've seen seesaws while growing up. With the Tata Harrier, you can sort of play the same game to an extent. This is a big ramp where you can sort of climb up, then the weight transfer will drop it forward. I've never tried this before, so let's see how it feels like. Now I'm in this V-shaped ditch, which shows the approach and departure angles, and yeah, like with these quite steep inclines, this car is managing that reasonably well. Now we're in a big slushy, boggy pit. Again, I'm going to use that off-road assist function. I don't really have to do anything aside from sort of steering. So let's see what this car does. So now I'm doing what is probably the most challenging part of this. We're climbing up a set of stairs, taking a very sharp right-angled left and then coming down a very steep slope. This looks a bit intimidating, so let's see how the Tata Harrier and I do here. Now we're on the main straight of the BIC to see how fast the Harrier EV can actually go. It's got quite a lot of power from the two motors, so let's see what it does. We're again going to be doing pretty high speeds.
Alright guys, on the count of 3, 2, 1. We're on boost mode, which means that we have 100% power from both the motors, front and back. We are doing about 155, 160 and 170. So as you can see, we can very comfortably go beyond. The car is far more capable, but we have some restrictions by the BIC guys, so we can't go past 170.
Now as you can see, we're just going to drive very quickly around the BIC. You saw what the Harrier EV could do from a standstill. Now let's see how it actually handles.
Putting the car in sport, and alright guys, the count of 3, 2, 1, let's go. Showing you how the torque vector system works. As you see, the ESP working fairly well, not letting me lose the traction despite the high speed that we are achieving. We had about 100 going into the parabola and throughout, so that's a very decent amount of speed, if you ask me. And now we'll start to cool down. That is it for the hot lap, guys. Hope you guys had fun.
Well, it's time to head in for a quick refreshment, but don't go anywhere. On the other side, we'll talk about the practical aspects of the Harrier EV. Welcome back here with us on Overdrive. Now, the Harrier EV, like you just saw, is very capable off the road, but it also has plenty of creature comforts and features to keep you busy. So let's dive into those aspects.
While the ADAS systems are what you would expect in a car in this segment, the most impressive application of this tech is in the self-parking and reversing assistance systems.
This is the auto park assist button. I press that, you get this on the screen, and now the car will try and sense and find a parking space.
The Harrier EV can retrace its last 50 meters to get you out of tight situations, and it also seems to detect and navigate into parallel and perpendicular parking spaces accurately. Now, if you're familiar with what Tata Motors usually does with one of its EV products, then the interiors of the Harrier EV will not come as a surprise to you, because it's very closely related to the one in the ICE version. There are of course some notable changes, the most apparent of which is this massive new 14.5-inch screen, this Harman screen, which uses a Samsung OLED sort of setup. Now, you've already seen broadly what it can do, and we'll get into more detail later on. Now, coming back to the rest of the interior, this is very familiar to what the facelifted Harrier was. So you have that touch panel here with the dual zone climate controls, and a lot of those functions, for example the 360-degree cameras, the boot, and all the climate functions are controlled through here. Now, just like before, I would have liked a manual control for the fan speed as well, but given that you have such a large screen with these chunky sort of panels here, it's okay, I can almost forgive it. Now, coming to the rest of the cabin, I think in terms of quality and finish, the Harrier was always a little bit better than the rest of the Tata lineup, and that continues. I think there isn't a massive step up nor a massive step down. And I really like this ambient lighting that's been added. Of course, the color itself is a bit more sober, if you will, than the ICE version. So you have the black and grey here, this pattern here. Now, this is soft, this ridge here is soft with the blue contrasting. So I was hoping maybe this bit too had some kind of texturing, but it doesn't. But I guess it's okay. I mean, maybe that's too much to ask at this price point. So anyway, you have that new Tata steering wheel, and the seat again is what you get, or at least it seems very similar to what it is in the regular Harrier. So it's very comfortable, I must say. So if you are of a wide frame, it will still hold you in place well, even though it has some nice bolstering on the sides. So I think most sizes will fit here. If anything, I would have liked a bit more thigh support for myself in the front, but the rounded edge of the seat makes it quite comfortable, and of course you have the full powered adjustment setup and ventilation, so that always helps. And finally, another sort of feature that's been talked about a lot inside the Harrier is this eIRVM, as they call it, which is essentially again somewhat like a Land Rover, where it gives you a feed of the rear and of the front from that camera that's on the antenna. And then of course you can also use it as a dash cam.
The new 14.5-inch screen still has the crisp logical layout of the smaller Tata screens we've seen so far, but adds the greater resolution that improves the experience, as do the new features that have been added. It continues to be quite fluid in its responses, although we do think Tata Motors could have made the fonts on the instrument cluster larger, as we have noted before.
Now you get a bit of a sidestep in the Harrier EV. I'm not sure if it's standard or an accessory, but either way I don't think you need it. It's not a very high car. So getting in is fairly simple. But yeah, as you can see on the inside, not a lot has changed over the ICE version, but clearly the new sort of Acti.EV architecture that this is based on, it has raised the floor because the floor pan is completely different. You now have a lot of the batteries underneath here. So that does mean that thigh support feels a bit less than what it was earlier in the ICE version. But you now have this very convenient boss mode. A lot of these cars are getting this, and this one gets it too. And you can see the sheer amount of space that I can free up. So if you are going to use this EV to be driven around in, you have more than enough space. And with this, thigh support is not too bad. And yeah, if you aren't very tall, you can still be comfortable. I think the seat back itself and the seats haven't changed all that much from the ICE version, like I said, but I don't quite like this heavy bolstering here. But that's just my opinion. You also get this center armrest here, and the headrests, they are very comfortable, and they also have these slight rests, so you can actually sort of doze off a little bit here. Now you keep getting those sunshades. You have those small speakers. Yeah, I really like the fact that you get air vents on the pillars, not very common in this segment. This big panoramic sunroof and the 65-watt chargers that have been newly added below here. Now as you can see, in terms of headroom, I am okay. Someone closer to 6 feet, they'll probably brush. But yeah, I guess that is par for the course.
Now, while we still haven't driven the Harrier EV enough to give you a full opinion on it, it's safe to say that the all-wheel drive system and the tech around it, like the traction control and off-road assist, will be helpful in the real world. It also seems to have the dynamic capability to manage its big power figures well. We are hoping to spend some quality time behind the wheel of the Harrier EV soon, so stay tuned.
Well, it's time to head into a final commercial break here on the show, but don't go anywhere, because on the other side we tell you all about Suzuki's very first electric scooter. Welcome back. You're with us on Overdrive. Suzuki's very first electric scooter for the Indian market is the eAccess, which is aimed at urban commuters. And while we had a very short time to test this out on a test track, we are here to tell you what it feels like to drive on our Indian roads.
According to the research done by Suzuki, EV penetration for two-wheeler space has gone from 2% in 2021 to 16% in 2025, which is a significant amount in such short time. It only made sense for Suzuki to bring the Access brand, which is doing good for itself in the ICE space, to the EV segment of things. Now, how does it ride? What are the features it has to offer? What is the range? I'm going to try and tell you all about that and more in this video. Let's start with how the eAccess looks and what does it have to offer in terms of cycle parts and features. Well, to start with, it does not look, it's not a head turner, but then again, it's not bland or boring. It has sharp creases, which gives it a sporty and aggressive look. And you have LED lighting, DRL light over here, lighting up front. This is LED, and you have LED lighting at the rear as well. And you also get these nice sleek indicators, which are quite aggressive. The eAccess runs on 12-inch wheels, tubeless tires, alloys, but it gets disc brakes up front and a drum unit at the rear. When it comes to suspension, telescopic unit up front and a swing arm unit at the rear. It comes shod with C8 tires. Now, as you move to the rear, you can see a single piece seat with nice white stitching, and it also has this, a seat stop function, which means that whenever you are trying to load and unload things into this boot space, which is again 17 liters, which is good for a half face helmet, not for a full face helmet, you don't have to hold this. It will be frozen just like this because of the seat stop feature. And when you're done with loading and unloading, you can just push it back. There it is. You have grab rails for the rear passenger. And I am around 5 feet 9 inches tall, and the seat height is 765 mm. And this is how I look when I sit on it. As you can see, the balls of my feet are comfortably planted on the ground, and you Everything falls perfectly, very natural. This is a very comfortable position to sit in. One thing that I like about the footboard is that it has been designed in such a way that you can keep your feet like this, push yourself back on the seat, and you can be in a little more comfortable position than neutral, which is actually something that I like. And this can be very handy, actually very useful when you are riding on those long journeys. Now, when it comes to other specifications, you have 160 mm of ground clearance and like I said, 765 mm of seat height, but this is just 122 kilos, which means it's quite nimble to handle. See? Easy peasy, which is very welcoming to riders of all shapes and sizes. It has a side stand and a center stand as well, which when engaged, there's a motor kill function as well, which means that if your side stand is engaged, this won't start, which is nice. Now, when it comes to other features, the dash here is a 4.2-inch color TFT dash, which shows you all the functions. So I just have to remove it from center stand, push start. It shows you the SOC, the speed. Now this blue means neutral riding mode. It goes to Eco. So there are 3 riding modes: Eco, Ride A and Ride B. So Ride A and Eco can be switched at the tap of a button, which is right over here. Yep, very easily switchable. So for Ride B, you have to stop the scooter and long press the mode for it to engage. So Ride B, you can long press and it will shift to Ride A. I'll explain the ride modes when I'm talking about the performance section. Now, when it comes to performance, the Suzuki eAccess is powered by a 3.072 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which powers a swing arm mounted motor, making around 5.6 PS of power and 50 Nm of peak torque. The company claims a range of 95 kilometers. Now, that range comes with 3 riding modes. One is Eco, which is the most frugal of all, which has a restricted top speed of 55 kilometers. And then there is Trip A and Trip B. Of the 3 ride modes, there are 2 modes with high region and 1 mode with low region. Eco and Trip A has very high region and Trip B has very low region. Now, Eco mode, the acceleration is a little dull. I would not say underwhelming, but it is a little dull. But then again, the frugal, the mode, it comes at a sacrifice of speed. When you shift to Trip A, which is where the top speed is logged at 71 kilometers per hour, and it does take its time to get there. But then again, if you are looking for spirited riding, then you have to shift to Trip B, which has low region mode, almost negligible. But of all the 3 modes, I was staying on the Trip B, which gives you a little more spirited riding and a sporty feeling of riding the electric scooter. When it comes to braking, the Suzuki eAccess gets a disc brake up front and a drum unit at the rear, and they both work in tandem because of the CBS feature. And I have no complaints regarding the brakes because they do a fine job of dropping anchors when needed. When it comes to suspension, now since we are testing on a track here and there were some bumpers which have been kept in the middle of the track, the suspension is actually on the supple side of things. It's a soft suspension and it is taken care of by a telescopic unit up front and a side-mounted monoshock at the rear. And they do a fine job, but a proper verdict can only be given when I get a test unit at my base in Delhi. Otherwise, it's a soft suspension which does a fine job of soaking up the bumpers that were put on the track. Now, when it comes to features, there is a tip over feature as well, which means that if the scooter is tipped over 65 degrees of angle, the motor will stop running, which is a good feature. Now, there is a lock function as well, which means that if you leave the vehicle unattended for over 5 minutes, it will lock itself. Now, that is added safety. The company claims that there is constant power delivery up until 10% of charge, which could not be validated because the scooter that I was riding never went below an SOC of 40%. So what's the verdict here? The Suzuki eAccess offers 95 kilometers of range, 5.6 PS of power, 15 Nm of peak torque, 3 ride modes, 4.2-inch TFT dash with Bluetooth tethering, weather alerts, turn-by-turn navigation as well. In my books, that's a proper electric scooter that does from point A to point B without any nonsense. But how does it fare amongst its class and the players that are already ruling the segment? Now that's a story for another day.
With that, it's a wrap on this week's edition of Overdrive. But remember, you can stay in touch with the team through our various social media platforms. You can write to us on YouTube. We'll see you next week. Until then, drive and ride safe.